because you see, there is one difference between Trump and Biden. Biden, I wouldn't say is a warmonger, but he doesn't mind wars, in the sense that Ukraine war. Ukraine war need not have occurred if President Biden had responded diplomatically, quote unquote, diplomatically to President Putin, who in the middle of December 2021 sent a draft treaty to take care of Russia's security concerns. Now, instead of engaging in diplomatic negotiations, that is the correct thing to do, President Biden chose a toxic form of public diplomacy.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm Dr. Shubhda Chaudhary and this is Middle East Insights platform. And today we are very, very, very lucky. I mean, I do not have words how to explain the kind of privilege we have right now. Ambassador Fabian had been a very important mentor for me and a person I could look up to and I still look up to for a very long time. And I remember that the best thing that I felt, like just a, jolt of adrenaline when he says that he reads my work. And I was like, yay! And this was many years back. So today we are going to have a talk on Can Trump 2.0 reshape the world order? And to introduce our esteemed guest, no one of us can do justice to who he is. And we can only try. So we have Gaurang, who is a volunteer at Middle East Insights, to speak and introduce Ambassador Fabian.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, Ambassador, and a very warm welcome to our audience joining today's important event titled Can Trump 2.0 Reshape the World Order? The Middle East Insights platform is a volunteer-driven community dedicated to fostering informed perspectives cutting across diverse global narratives fueled by shared curiosity. My name is Gaurang Salkar, a volunteer researcher with the platform. I am a postgraduate in international studies from Christ University as well as a Jan Suraj Fellow. As someone deeply engaged in the study of populist foreign policies and discourse analysis, it is a true privilege to have this opportunity to introduce today's distinguished guest, Ambassador K.P. Fabian. Ambassador Fabian served in the Indian Foreign Service for over 3 decades, during which he was posted to Madagascar, Austria, Iran, Sri Lanka, Canada, Finland, Qatar, and Italy. Ambassador's diplomatic service has placed him at the forefront of pivotal moments in history. He spent 3 years in Iran in 1979, witnessing the revolution from the eye of the storm. As the Gulf Joint Secretary, he also coordinated the evacuation of 176,000 Indian nationals from Iraq and Kuwait. He has represented India at major multilateral bodies, including the United Nations, the IAEA, and the FAO, to name a few, making him an authoritative voice in crisis management, diplomacy, and tectonic shifts in the global order. Since his retirement, Ambassador has been a thought leader in academia, media, NGOs, and the corporate sector. His books, Common Sense on the War on Iraq, published in 2003, Diplomacy, Indian Style, published in 2012, and his most recent, The Arab Spring That Was and Wasn't, offer critical insights into international relations and India's diplomatic approach. Today, as we consider Trump's return and the way it could reshape global dynamics, there is no one better suited than Ambassador Fabian to guide us through the complexities of the international order and the potential tremors that await us. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us. Over to you, ma'am.
and we are really privileged. So let me start with the first question. My first question is that how do you predict? I know no one can predict, but how do you predict the ramifications of Trump's second presidency, especially on the domestic politics of US itself?
Thank you, Dr. Shubda. Indeed, a great pleasure to be with you. We met only the other day at Algerian embassy. I was, very happy that we could meet again after a few years, correct?
Yes.
And thank you, Gaurang, for that very cordial and, not that brief introduction to your question about the impact of, or rather implications of Trump's victory for United States domestic matters. Well, let's look at it this way. A, it is Trump's victory, not that of the Republican Party, because he's put his stamp on the party. Second, it is as much Biden's defeat as Trump's victory. Because the American people, or 52% of them, of the voters, did not approve of what Biden has been doing. Well, domestically, of course, inflation. When you go to the gas station, you have to pay more. And as we all know, Americans love to have big cars and roam around all the time. Second, of course, grocery store. Now, Kamala Harris supporters try to argue, the inflation rate was brought down. But we all know that inflation is cumulative. So even if you bring down the rate, well, my problem as a consumer remains, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, okay, now, Trump has two options. One is to be remembered in history as one of the best presidents in the United States, provided he is prepared to change his decision-making style, and not only the decision-making style, but also, for want of a better word, let me say character. Because his character is vindictive, settling scores, remembering humiliations, and going after A, B, C, D, E, F, non-stop. Now, who was it? In ancient Greece, they used to say, character is destiny. You can see that in the Greek tragedies. You see? Now, he is likely to be, I say likely to be, I'm not saying that he's going to be, he's likely to be rather vindictive and authoritarian. And coming to specifics, he said in his victory speech that he will keep the promises. Now, what are the promises? That he would forcibly deport the undocumented immigrants. Now, we don't know the figure, but it could be anything between 11 million to 15 million. Now, tell me, first of all, how do you locate them? Only by raiding their houses or their workplaces. Now, their workplaces, well, they work for American citizens. Now, if I am an American citizen, and if the security forces come and raid my workplace, would I like it? So I might go to the court. So there can be hundreds, thousands of court cases. Secondly, logistically, how can you deport, let's give the minimum figure of 11 million, logistically, and to different countries? Suppose they don't cooperate. You're sending them by air. They don't let you land. Of course, it will be mainly Mexico. Now, how Mexico is going to behave, we do not know. Trump has already threatened, 100% tariff and all that. So my guess, only guess, because Trump is essentially unpredictable. My guess is that he will carry out some symbolic, forcible deportation and then declare victory. Because if you remove people who are working, production will come down, prices will go up. Okay. Second part, he wants to, sort of dismiss the special counsel who has been after him. And he is looking for attorney general and all that who will be pliable. He might get them. He might get them. Because in the American psyche, if the president of the United States is asking you, you go. But that will, what shall I say, harm the essential spirit of the American Constitution, which believes in, we all know of Montesquieu, the French philosopher, whose doctrine said, between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative. These are the three parts of the state, and they should not interfere, encroach into each other's territory. But Trump believes in encroaching in total. Of course, he has got the Senate. He is likely to have the House, and he has 6-3 majority in the Supreme Court. But you cannot always go to the Supreme Court. You have to govern. You can't always be fighting. So, as I said, Trump has a choice to be one of the best, but he has also the choice to be one of the worst. What he will choose, we can only guess.
That is very interesting, sir, because it often, as you talked about the Greek mythology, so there's this Greek mythology about Icarus. He was the son of the Greek character who made wings out of feather and wax. And Icarus was so confident that he can fly and fly so high. And he used to show it off to everyone that, look, I can fly so high. And then he started slowly flying towards the sun. And then his back started melting. So that is a certain kind of, and then he died because of it. So that kind of, the idea that you put forward, that character's destiny, is also very interesting. And talking about, as you have mentioned that Trump, his grandfather migrated from Bavaria in 1905. Trump actually comes from a Scottish-German ancestry. I don't understand this simple logic, and I'm coming from a point of ignorance, that how are 11 million undocumented employees in US, for example, everyone gets a national security number in US if they're working. If they're outsiders also, they have some form of identification. It's very easy to track down without actually raiding the offices because of every digital payment and all of that, and the national security number like the Aadhaar card, which emulated the concept of it. So why do you think it will be very difficult for him? Yes, I understand that the countries won't cooperate, obviously, but he has the CIA on his side. He will have the deep state on his side. He'll have his, investigators on his side. So it's not very difficult for him to actually find out the right figures.
Uh, Absolutely, I agree with you. It's not difficult to identify. They probably have the data. But it's not a question of identifying, it's a question of picking them up physically.
Yeah.
All right. Now, to pick up physically 11 million people, no, that is logistically a nightmare. And another thing, as I said, if you are sending your people to pick up my employees, 10 of them, as American citizen, I will go to court. And I will also, I mean, if you do that, let's put it this way: 11 million undocumented, out of which 6 million are working. Okay, because families. 6 million means, well, let us put it this way: 1 million employers. All right. Okay, somebody's working the driver, somebody, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. 1 million American citizen employers are going to be up in arms. And they can make a lot of noise. And if you take away my workmen or workwomen, well, my services will stop. I have been providing you, Senator, with drivers whenever your office wanted. I can't do it now. So, there is always, in economy, there is always what is called, contagion. It doesn't stop at one point. It goes, impacts. So it's not that easy.
Yeah. And also, like, for example, after 9/11, the kind of surveillance on the footprints which was done in US on most of the Muslims and many others, that itself was very scary. I think the level of surveillance will also increase, apart from just actual physical pickup. The surveillance on their online activity, the tracking of what they do, the consumption, everything, that level of surveillance. And it can be used as a certain kind of, soft power to create a certain kind of necessity to ask them to leave. For example, if he does not, he makes changes for the H-1B visa holders of India. That again will eventually, it's a cut and dry situation that they'll not get the visa. It will not be renewed.
Absolutely. But regarding H-1B visa, he might be accommodative because he understands that India produces youngsters, whom American economy needs. In fact, I think in his previous avatar, probably Infosys, because of the H-1B visa and other matters, had to employ about 100,000 local Americans. So our companies, IT companies, are more or less geared up to face the consequences should there be a problem. Okay. But there may not be a problem with H-1B visa because he knows that Indian brain can be of help in propelling American economy.
Yeah, he has to protect the geniuses. The geniuses are very rare, like Elon Musk, who's funding his campaign and God knows who many. But anyway, coming back to, I don't understand, sir, when you mentioned that he holds a 6-3 majority in Supreme Court. What does it mean technically?
Technically, it means that if anything goes to the Supreme Court, any issue, he can be reasonably certain that he will get a favorable verdict. Now, this is, of course, totally against the idea of justice. We all know how justice without eyes, sort of weighing things. But in the American system, since the president nominates, and I suppose the Senate has to ratify these appointments, well, it has been the experience that even some, not all, Supreme Court judges remain grateful to the man or president who nominated them.
Ah, okay. Not very difficult to understand, but most of the American justice system relies on the jury framework.
Pardon?
The jury framework, when there are juries who are selected for giving the final opinion and not the judge.
Yeah, that is true. But my point is that, ultimately, any serious issue can go right up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And it is the Supreme Court which it selects a jury also.
Okay.
Yeah. Jury is not elected.
Yeah.
The court decides.
Yeah, and it's a very long process. They select around 70, 80 people, and then they come down to 11, and it's all like, both the lawyers of the defendant and the other side, or the people's side, or the defendant side, they can actually cut down the jury, whoever they think is having any kind of bias. So that system itself can be changed according to the whim and fancy of the lawyers and the judge itself. I agree. Now, coming to Michigan. As you mentioned that Michigan had 15 electoral votes. Michigan had the largest and has the largest Arab American community. But the community is not monolithic. I agree to a certain point that Biden's administration was the albatross around the neck for Kamala Harris. She did not create a space to take responsibility of whatever went wrong. And that was a massive election fiasco, which was done by her. But at the same time, what do you think, like how the, now that on 20th of January, 2025, Trump takes the Oval Office, then he starts trying to avoid, revert, end the wars which are going on in Middle East. He will have a very pro-Israel stand, which even Kamala Harris had. But then how are the Arab Americans going to perceive him? Like it's a deal with the devil.
Yeah, very, very important question. Now, the thing is this. Let's look at the big picture. Biden claimed that he as president has done more than any other president for Israel. Yet, Netanyahu openly campaigned for Trump. So, Biden-Harris, because Biden was not on the ticket, but he was on the ticket metaphorically. Biden-Harris lost considerable Jewish vote. Okay. Now, coming to the Arab votes, for months and months, Biden closed his eyes to the atrocities committed by Israel, to my mind, amounting to genocide. Even the ICJ, without using, plain English, has said it, as you know. He said in January, Israel should prevent acts amounting to genocide from happening. Now, why do I ask you to prevent something unless you have been doing it or you are about to do it? Okay, but the ICJ did not use plain English because it wanted to be politically correct. Because if it had said that Israel was committing genocide, then Biden will be obligated to stop sending weapons to Israel. We know the title of the convention, to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. Punish if you have not prevented. Okay. So then for the Arab Americans, they went to some of the meetings held by Kamala Harris. They had their sort of placards and this and that. In one case, one of them wanted to speak because other people also were speaking, voters, but they were not permitted. In other words, they concluded that she will only continue Biden's policy with perhaps some cosmetic changes. So they thought they should not vote for her. I do not know how many of them voted for Trump. That I do not know. But the point is they did not. So maybe they did not vote at all. But maybe some of them may have even voted for Trump just to make sure she's defeated. You see? Now, what are they expecting from him? Well, that is difficult to say because, you see, there is one difference between Trump and Biden. Biden, I wouldn't say he's a warmonger, but he doesn't mind wars, in the sense that Ukraine war. Ukraine war need not have occurred if President Biden had responded diplomatically, quote unquote, diplomatically to President Putin, who in the middle of December 2021 sent a draft treaty to take care of Russia's security concerns. Now, instead of engaging in diplomatic negotiations, that is the correct thing to do, President Biden chose a toxic form of public diplomacy and you reject it. He said, NATO has every right to have an open door policy. Ukraine has every right to choose its defense policy. So, in other words, Putin was left with no choice but to attack again. I'm not justifying what he did, but we have to look at the big picture. You see, not a question of justification or not. So that is now Trump doesn't like to have wars, big wars. I mean, he would like to carry out, assassinations like Soleiman, the Iranian general. But I don't think he wants big wars. Okay? So it is possible for Trump to tell Netanyahu what to do, and Netanyahu will obey. Unlike Biden, whom he consistently fooled, consistently, disregarded. Remember, Biden came out with a ceasefire plan, which he claimed was based on Israeli papers, Israeli proposals. And then he got it approved by Security Council in May or June. And then what happened? Then talks were going on. Biden said a ceasefire agreement was imminent. Blinken said, yes, it's going to happen. Netanyahu was fooling them, taking them for a ride. You see? Now, whatever it is, you cannot take Trump for a ride.
Yeah, because the other way around. And that's also interesting and entertaining. Made me order a TV actually after, the first time in my life. But one thing which I really wanted to ask you, sir, regarding what you say about Biden is correct, because he is a self-proclaimed Zionist and he openly says about that. Netanyahu might not have met the hostage families in Israel. Biden went and met them. So that kind of, and I feel sorry. I feel sorry for Anthony Blinken because of his continuous round-the-clock trips to Middle East in so many times. They were not at all, fruitful. And that was a certain kind of, even the Columbia University and the other university uprisings that took place, everyone was reminded of what happened in the 1960s and 70s in US and how the politicians were very critical of any kind of student uprising, be it against the Vietnam War or many other contexts. And the freedom of speech and everything which was there, the framing of anti-Semitism was used massively. At the same time, I do not mean that no anti-Semitic behavior was not seen in US. It was seen. By the same time, the larger propaganda of anti-Semitism was used as a political currency. Something which I don't understand, sir, coming to a very personal question, is that Trump has said that India is a trade abuser. And India is a trade abuser. And it has, his entire economic policy is on tariffs. I have no idea how that functions. I don't know if even economists have an idea on how the entire foreign policy of tariffs and domestic policy of tariffs is going to regulate itself. But he is planning to have 60% tariffs on China. 10 to
Yes.
20% tariffs on other countries, and I think India comes into the other countries. 100% tariff on Mexico. Thankfully, we don't come in that. But how would that impact India-US relation?
Thank you. But just one word about the adjective anti-Semitic.
Semitism. Yeah.
Yes. Now, Semitic religions,
Yeah. Yeah.
Judaism,
Yes.
Christianity, and Islam.
Yeah.
Okay. So the word, means something like that. So
Yeah.
if you say anti-Semitism, it means somebody is against all these religions.
Exactly. Against Arabs also.
Incidentally,
Yeah.
I won't take time on that. Israel always weaponizes history. Just to give one example, the Holocaust. Most of us identify with the Jews who were killed. Terrible thing. 6 million Jews were killed. But if you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, you will see that more than 6 million non-Jews were killed.
Who were
including
these non-Jews?
3.3 Soviets.
Okay. Okay.
So, the lesbians and all that sort of thing. Okay? And the gypsies, all sorts of. But the point I'm making is that Israel has monopolized the story of the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
We do not think of others. So they weaponize history, and now coming to the trade war which Trump might start. Trump is street smart. He cannot start a trade war with the rest of the world simultaneously. With China, India, and Mexico and others at the same time. Because then they will respond, and what will happen? There will be utter chaos, and the consumer in the United States will curse Trump. So he won't do that. He believes he's a great deal maker. He believes that if he has a difference of opinion with you, he can sit down with you, charm you, and get from you a deal which he can live with and you also can live with. So he will threaten tariff increase, but his intention is to have deals. And I suppose he will do it one by one. You can't be fighting with the entire world at the same time. So that is one. But also, it is possible that, I have written about it and earlier, and I was glad to see it that the Hill from the United States had said it, that let's understand the geopolitical picture. There is a deep nexus between Russia and China. North Korea also is part of that nexus. Iran is getting increasingly a part of that nexus, mainly thanks to Trump and Biden. Biden, who as candidate had said that he would resume the Iran nuclear deal, he didn't do that. Okay. Now, it will be in the interest of the United States to weaken the nexus between Russia and China. And Trump might pursue a policy which improves relations between the United States and Russia, hoping that there might be some divide between Russia and China. I do not think he will succeed because both Russians and Chinese, they don't look at things in a 4-year time spectrum.
Yeah.
They look for over a long period of time. Trump is there, but he's gone after 4 years. And America has identified China as its rival to be dealt with. So Russia and China, they might make certain moves to give the impression that there is a divide, but there will be no real divide. But Trump will try. And even North Korea. I personally believe he did the right thing in his previous tenure to have gone to North Korea. Because again, let's understand, because we have to dig into history. I may just take a minute or two. 1950 June, Korean War started. Initially, the North Koreans came down, crossed the 38th parallel and all that. But then came MacArthur, Douglas MacArthur. And then the so-called United Nations Army, which is actually the US Army, reporting not to the Secretary General, but to the White House, you see, started moving up. Early October 1950, Sardar came Panikkar, Indian ambassador in Beijing, then known as Peking, gets summoned to the Foreign Office around midnight or 1 o'clock to meet with Chu Enlai, Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. And Chu Enlai wants Panikkar to inform Nehru that unless MacArthur stops his move northwards and withdraws to the 38th parallel, PLA, People's Liberation Army, will step in. Nehru conveys it to Truman. Truman doesn't take it seriously. New York Times says, oh, this thin-blooded idealist called Jawaharlal Nehru. And MacArthur tells the president, Mr. President, the boys will be back home for Christmas. Christmas 1950. 3 years later, more than 3 million deaths later, more than 50,000 American military deaths later, the ceasefire was on the same 38th parallel, slightly adjusted in North Korea's favor. So tell me, who was a thin-blooded idealist? Okay, so why did North Korea go to think of nuclear weapons? Because there was no peace treaty. After the ceasefire in 1953, there should have been a peace treaty, which America refused because it wanted to keep its troops in the Korean Peninsula. So years later, North Korea started looking for security through nuclear weapons. Sanctions followed, but North Korea got more weapons, more missiles. So the correct thing to do is to talk to North Korea, see whether there can be any limitation on their nuclear weapons and missiles, and also normalize relations with North Korea, so that there can be some check. You cannot denuclearize North Korea now. You can only sort of have a limitation. You can only have a understanding. So that is what he tried to do, and he might try to do it again, according to the Hill.
Yeah, I mean, North Korea has been the foundation or maybe the ideation of make North Korea great again for a very long time, which, they have completed. They are not impacted by the economic depression. They are not impacted by the tariffs or by the other aspects of, WTO or IMF and all of that. So they have secluded themselves and remained so in that way. That was a good step of him trying to have negotiations. But most of the times, it used to fire because the kind of difference between, I guess, what his team and he were actually doing in terms of diplomacy, and on the other side, what his press team and he were putting out on social media. These two were completely divergent, and the consumption was there for both of them. So that created a certain kind of, this, because a perception game was something that Trump is really good at, actually. Even if it means writing typos in his tweet.
Yes, but also, in the case of North Korea, what I call the deep state, came in the way,
Yeah.
you know. And now, in fact, Trump has been saying, well, during my first term, they sort of pulled the rug from me, off my feet, you know, and this time he will be careful. So, this is a slightly different Trump we are going to see.
Yeah. I cannot do the blasphemy of predicting him. No. The point is, a question is asked by Kathan, sir. The question is that Trump said that he would withdraw troops from Syria. Biden faced massive backlash when he withdrew, and rightly so, troops from Afghanistan. The phases of withdrawal from Syria are in the process for a very long period of time. But how do you think that Trump is going to take the entire context of withdrawing the troops? Because if he does, the extremist, violent ISIS remnants or Al Qaeda remnants, they're going to come back out.
Well, I personally feel that America should withdraw its troops from Syria. And since President Assad is prepared to fight with ISIS, should give him all necessary support. Because Assad cannot be removed.
Yeah.
So it is better for America to withdraw its troops. Because what are they doing? I agree that to an extent they are preventing ISIS elements from, capturing territory or creating trouble. But as I said, it is for the government of Syria, that is President Assad, to decide how best to tackle ISIS in Syria.
Yes.
And let me also tell you, way back, when ISIS first captured a small territory in Syria, the name I forget now, but it is there in my book, The Arab Spring That Was and Wasn't. The defense intelligence told the then president, this is a good thing. We can make use of it against Assad. And here I want to recall Obama's fault. Because ISIS became a big power only because it captured Mosul.
Yeah.
The second largest city in Iraq, where the Central Bank of Iraq had a branch with lots of money, probably $400 million worth. You know what I mean? Now, they were coming from Syria, and Americans controlled the sky. They knew what was happening. And what did Obama do? Instead of taking any action against these people coming from there, he went on telling the Iraqi prime minister, expand your cabinet to include the Sunnis and all that sort of thing. So Obama could have easily prevented the capture of Mosul. Easily. So, in a manner of speaking, Obama is responsible for the big ISIS, which developed later and which was put down at a heavy cost. How many were killed? Remember, if you make a big mistake, to rectify it again is very costly.
No, I agree with you completely, because Obama, the entire, again, there is different kind of propaganda when one looks up to Obama because of his, the only African-American president, and so much of, promises that he had made, even of closing the Guantanamo Bay and so much. I do agree that during his first term, he had more power. During his second term, he did not have that much power because of the control of the state, Senate and the House. But Obama himself was very culpable of a lot of collateral damage that has taken place in the Middle East. That is a fact. And they have not taken responsibility of it. So that is a certain kind of nuance that we often miss looking at it. The next question is basically asked by Gaurang sir, who introduced you. To what extent is it justified to attribute significant credit to Donald Trump for shaping US policy and world order? Because there are many structural constraints that he faces. In particular, how does his past policies, marked by anti-multilateralism, more about economic protectionism, reflect an attempt to either disrupt or adapt the international order? He stands against
Thank you.
globalization.
Yes. Now, if I may start with a point about language. We all speak of the world order, international order. But tell me, if you look at it carefully, don't you find much disorder?
Yes.
In the real world, there is so much of disorder and some order. But we all speak of the order. Well, anyway, this is a human tendency to see more order than there is, about which Francis Bacon said, but I won't go into it, the four idols. Very interesting, but if we have time, we can later go into it. Now, so when I say reshaping, incidentally, the title was given by the editor.
Ah, okay. Okay.
As you know, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And because of the time constraint, I didn't want to spend time. So he will be shaping or reshaping the world order come disorder. Now coming to specific points. Multilateral diplomacy. He is a deal maker. He doesn't believe in multilateral diplomacy. So he might make things difficult for the United Nations. He can even postpone the payment, annual payment. He can withdraw from WHO, UNESCO, UNICEF, and all that. He can. I'm not saying he will. It is possible. So that is one thing. They may not care for WTO. After all, in WTO, if I remember right, there's an appellate mechanism, and that has to have a certain number of members in the appellate board. Now, the United States has stood in the way of electing new members. So, in other words, the appellate mechanism is not working. You see? So, he can do much damage to multilateral diplomacy. Then, would he do much damage to NATO? Good. I personally don't think he will, though pundits in Europe have said, he will walk out of NATO and all that. Let me explain. Trump is the most enthusiastic salesman for the military-industrial congressional complex. As we remember, Eisenhower had warned his compatriots against the increasing influence of the military-industrial complex. In his valedictory address, if I remember right, in 1961. But America didn't listen to him. And mind you, he was a general, supreme commander in Europe during Second World War. Okay. Later, it became military-industrial congressional complex. Why? Because if I am, a big arms manufacturer, I will come to you, you are the senator, and say that, I got a project. If you will support me, I will contribute so much to your re-election fund. And you will agree, shake hands. So, congressional complex. Now, that is very powerful, and that is why, to my mind, when the Soviet Union collapsed, 1990-91, there was an opportunity to build up a cooperative European security system, including Russia. And Russia was willing. But the military-industrial complex did not want it. Because then the defense budgets will come down. Then they will not be able to laugh all the way to the bank. which they do now, thanks to Ukraine war and thanks to the war investigation. You see? So he is the most enthusiastic salesman for it. And he knows that if he walks out of NATO, then Europe will stop buying from America arms. So what he will do is that he may threaten to walk out. Threat is one thing. Walking out is another. And he will say, okay, I won't walk out if you agree to spend 3% or 4% of your GDP on defense, which means buying more from America. So that is what he wants. So he will never walk out.
That is I don't know, the kind of, like, right now it has been said that Mike Pompeo and others who were very integral part of his cabinet before will not be in his current cabinet. A lot of impact also depends on who is advising him when and how, in what way. So let's see how that goes. The next question is by Fayaz Mehdi sir, who has been a very regular anchor volunteer at Middle East Insights. And his question is, what specific strategic and diplomatic adjustment might India need to consider under Trump 2.0, especially in the past remarks of America First, the entire 2019 Harley-Davidson fiasco. Also, the interesting part that in 2020, when he came and visited India, more important than meeting the politicians, he was much more interested in having a press conference with all the businessmen in Delhi, which is rightly so, but that is what his interest lied in. At the same time, he played a very diplomatic role in being very mature and not commenting the Northeast Delhi riots that had taken place. The press was after him to, the paparazzi was literally, after him to speak on that. But he was smart in that. So how do you think, what Fayaz is asking is that, on one hand, US knows very prominently that if Russia, China, India come together, it's going to be very difficult for US. So there are obviously the Western narrative of creating trenches between China and India, between Russia and India. There's this entire, meme that is going around that Russian president did not call and congratulate Trump because Trump did not congratulate him, though they might be talking completely on other safe channels. But that is the kind of, logic that is going around. So in simple words, what Fayaz is asking is that how will India's foreign policy change? Because we are having difficulty with George Soros. We were having difficulty with few other aspects also of the American diplomacy. We are having a very difficult context right now with Canada. So, and you have been stationed at Canada. So how do you think that India's foreign policy will have to change or adjust according to Trump's majestic presence?
Okay. Now, just a point about advisors. You said that, it much will depend on his advisors. But Trump's approach is to change the advisor if he doesn't get the advice which he wants.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I will not debate that.
Okay. Now, coming to India, you said that America first. Okay. But we in India also have India first. I know of a foundation called Pale India in Delhi, which is doing very well. So we are also rather Indo-centric. Now, another point is personal chemistry is very important for Trump and for Prime Minister Modi. And between them, there is good personal chemistry.
There's bromance, yes.
Okay. So that will help up to a point. Up to a point. Because you also mentioned about Harley Davidson. Remember the story?
Yes.
America put duty on steel and aluminium. We gave WTO a list of 31 items we were going to put duty on, increase the tariff on, and this motorcycle was included. Trump got wild, and we withdrew. We deleted that. Now, the latest I hear is that they have gone from India. Anyway, so Trump can be difficult. Trump can be very tough and rough when it comes to trade. But Trump also understands the geopolitical weight of India. He understands that if he pushes India closer to Russia, and he understands that Russia and India are really close to each other, despite all that the West has done. Remember, there's a time when Western diplomats in Delhi were openly saying that India should do this, India should do that. Now, again, when during the time I was a diplomat, I would have never done it. Whatever I had to say, I would have told the Foreign Office during my talks, but not to the media. But, the Western diplomats thought that India can be influenced, that media pressure might work, Okay, anyway, it didn't work. Okay, so I don't think that will work. Now, you also mentioned about Canada. Well, again, the great deal maker. It is possible, not certain, that Trump will tell both Justin Trudeau and Modi, listen, why don't you settle it?
Yes.
If you want, I can settle it for you. Why don't you settle it? And it might get settled. Now coming to a specific matter, Panoom, the matter is with a court in New York. Well, let's again understand. It is not that America is worried about any alleged attempt, because we don't know the facts, to what extent India was involved. There is one story that, in America, and Indian official spokespersons have told us a different story, but we don't know the real story. But I will be surprised if America is worried that India tried to kill someone whom India considers a terrorist. Because America has been doing it. We are taking a book from their book, a page from their book.
Yeah.
But what is happening is that Canada and America are working on this together, and America is milking it. That is, by bringing up this matter from time to time. They are trying to get advantage for them in other matters which are under negotiation. Now, of course, one of my friends in Delhi, he is from the IB, retired. He even said that, the reference to Amit Shah, if Canada did it, it should have been with the consent of the United States. The Five Eyes,
Yeah.
But, and that, they might even want a regime change here. But I think that is an intelligence man's overwrought imagination. I don't think Trump will seriously consider any such thing. But he will certainly milk it. He will derive as much advantage in other matters by keeping up. But as I said earlier, he might also sort of, tell Justin and Modi, stop it.
Yeah.
Talk. Settle it.
Yeah.
Now, coming to the larger question, we have to walk a tightrope. That is, don't confront Trump. Confronting him is dangerous. But don't succumb with alacrity. Because let's understand, we are a big buyer of weapons from America as far as Trump is concerned. And we?
Yes.
So as a buyer, we have some leverage. Only thing is that should be exercised diplomatically, not through the media. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So diplomatically, we can leverage that as a big buyer of weapons from America, and with Trump being their best salesman. So we can do that. And also, we can point out the geopolitical weight of India, again, diplomatically, not through the media.
Yeah.
And Trump will understand that.
Okay. So now I have questions from two conflict areas actually. One question is by Anurag, the second question is by me. Anurag is asking that Trump proposed a peace plan for Ukraine, which involves creating a 800-mile buffer zone between Russia and Ukraine to be patrolled by European troops, and Kiev accepting its current border exchange. How do you see this kind of peace plan will work?
Well, Ukraine is in serious trouble, and I am afraid that President Zelensky is not seeing the big picture or the real picture. Because with all the support which Ukraine got from the United States, from Germany, the second largest supplier of military aid, NATO, European Union, and others, Korea, Japan, and all that. With all that, I think the amount, there is an institute, Kiel Institute of Study of War. If I remember right, they have put out a figure of $189 billion, military and economic aid.
$189 billion.
Yeah. With all that, Ukraine has not been able to successfully resist Russia. And Zelensky's idea of going to Kursk, attacking Russia, making an inroad and holding on to that territory, and arguing that when they are sitting at the table, well, I will withdraw from Kursk, but you withdraw from the rest of the territory which you have taken. No, it won't work. That is too naive. So the fact of the matter is, Russia has a significant local military advantage in Ukraine. Russia has more shells than all the NATO put together.
Yeah.
European Union had said some time back they will provide 1 million shells by the end of the year and all that. But they are not able to do that. So the local military superiority of Russia has to be recognized, despite the fact that the total NATO defense expenditure is how many times bigger than that of Russia? Once I remember it was 10 or 12 times that of Russia. You know what I mean? It's about 1.6 trillion. Russia is probably 180 billion. So
yeah.
Not 10, but it's huge. So it doesn't, so Ukraine has to agree to ceasefire talks. And what Russia has said is that, remember way back in March, April, 2022, Istanbul talks.
Yeah.
They had an agreement, but then steps in the British Prime Minister, Johnson, on behalf of Britain and the United States. And the matter is, and Zelensky says, stop it. So that agreement was, for Russia to retain a part of what it had captured, and for Ukraine not to join NATO. So my view is that Ukraine should agree to the talks. Otherwise, if the war continues, and Trump will say he is stopping the aid, and you know that Germany, the coalition has collapsed.
Yeah.
Partly because of aid to Ukraine, partly. Though, strange things are happening. The foreign minister had gone to Ukraine just 3 days ago to show support. All these public displays of support, they don't add up to much. Of course, they hit the headlines.
Yeah.
Now, this headlines chasing diplomacy, I'm afraid it has got seeds of its own failure.
Sir, one is by Maliha, and that question simply is basically about what is the future of the Saudi-Israel peace negotiation. Will Trump work on that? I'm sure he's going to, but Saudi is moving towards Iran for several reasons of its own defense. But will Saudi-Israel peace take place in the near future with the genocide going on and all of it?
Well, my answer is that MBS, the young crown prince, prime minister now.
Yeah.
We know why he became prime minister, so that he gets protection under international law when he travels abroad.
Okay.
After that journalist whose
Jamal
body was
Khashoggi.
cut into pieces.
Yeah.
Khashoggi.
Khashoggi.
Okay. Now, in his heart, he wants normalization.
Yeah.
MBS. But politically, it is possible for him to do that so long as this war continues. So, should there be a settlement, hostages being freed, and IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, withdrawing from Gaza as a temporary measure? Because, Trump also can tell Netanyahu, listen, you agree to this now. A little later, you can do what you want. But let this normalization take place now. You see? And once normalization takes place, it doesn't get reversed immediately. You see? He will tell him, you can do what you like later, once normal. So it is, should there be a ceasefire based on the freeing of hostages and the withdrawal of IDF from Gaza, then that Saudi-Israeli normalization will happen. But my view is that if you're looking at a longer time frame, it is going to happen.
Yes.
In fact, it should have happened but for the 7th of October.
Yeah, one of the reasons why 7th of October actually took place.
Exactly.
Why Hamas used it as a propaganda to, attack. And that is, but anyway, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the Gulf countries, they have tacit alliances with Israel anyway, even though if they do not recognize each other diplomatically. They have very strong tacit alliances in intelligence. Imagine that when Iran in April was attacking Israel, it had informed Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and all of that to inform Israel that, okay, we are going to attack you. So there are very, very different kinds of intelligence and tacit alliances, even though there's no stamped diplomatic alliance. Now I'm coming to my very desperate question, which is the last question of the day. And this has not been talked about in the media a lot, not in the Indian media. Trump's son-in-law is Lebanese. His daughter, Tiffany, married a Lebanese American whose father is a billionaire, a Lebanese American billionaire. His name is Masad Bulus. So technically, Trump has a Lebanese son-in-law. Kushner should not get all the limelight. The point is, how do you think that, because one of the major funders of Trump's campaign has been the father-in-law, the father of Tiffany's husband. Second, there's also prediction of, because there's a caretaker government in Lebanon right now, which is not fully functional, like in terms of diplomacy and power. How do you think that this funding, campaigning, support of Masad Bulus is going to change US's perspective on Lebanon?
Well, very complicated question, but Lebanon, I've been there. You can go to a shop and pay dollars, and they will give you back in dollars or in Lebanese currency.
Yeah.
At that time. I don't know now. At that time. That is before I wrote my book. I had gone there to meet with people. Okay. Now, Lebanese army is more or less funded and equipped by United States.
Yes.
And, when Lebanon was bombed, the response in the West was so different. In Gaza, Israel was going on killing the civilians. But when it came to Lebanon, I think in Paris they held a conference and raised so much money. Macron did it.
The colonizers' guilt.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that Lebanon is special in the eyes of the West. Lebanon is special. And it is possible that Trump might tell Israel to stop it, and he might make some arrangements, as you said, for some peacekeeping force and all that. It is quite possible. And as I said earlier, if Trump tells Netanyahu to do that, it will be done. In fact, they may even play a game that, Netanyahu might pretend that he's doing it on his own. Well, all these games are possible, so that it doesn't look as though he has been asked by Trump to do it, But, so all these things are possible. But, that I suppose we'll have to wait till Trump gets into the White House.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And till then, I'm afraid fellow human beings get killed.
Yeah. And we are consuming it on an everyday basis.
And thank you for telling me about the Lebanese son-in-law. I didn't know about it. Okay, Trump, I had written an article when Trump was elected way back.
2016.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had said that here is a real estate company's CEO getting into the White House.
Yeah.
And his style has been, he calls the managers, he says this is the agenda, and he just gives his decisions. Even if for the sake of formality, he goes around and asks the managers to say what they wanted to say. His decision is already made. He doesn't, sort of listen to them. He knows. He thinks he knows that he knows. You know what I mean?
Just like all of us.
That I had said, that will be a bull in a china shop.
Yeah.
I had said that then. Now, looking back, I should say that the bull has not destroyed the china shop entirely. A good part of it remains, but it did destroy by, for example, walking out of the Iran nuclear deal. He pushed Iran towards China and Russia. He enhanced America's reputation as, a state which he didn't enhance America's reputation as a state which can be relied upon. That America cannot be trusted. That impression he strengthened. So, my view is that it probably the deal maker dimension will be the strongest this time.
Yeah.
And for that he will use threats. And the rest of the world have understood that he is essentially looking for a deal.
Yeah.
So we have to make a deal with him.
A win-win situation for DC. But with this, sir, I would really like to thank you